Welcome to Criminal Minds, the podcast where we explore psychology, motivations, and social implications behind some of the most famous criminal cases in history. I'm Kennedy, and in today's episode, we'll be diving into Truman Capote's landmark nonfiction novel, In Cold Blood. We'll be examining how Capote's portrayal of the two killers at the center of the Clutter family murders, Perry Smith and Dick Hickok, challenges traditional ideas of morality and criminality. What does it mean to be good or evil? Are these labels truly clear-cut, or do they depend on context and perspective? Let's explore these questions through three key themes in Capote's work. So let's get started. Segment 1. The complexity of Perry Smith, the man behind the monster. Our first topic centers on Perry Smith, one of the two killers Capote spends a great deal of time portraying in Cold Blood. Traditionally, criminals like Perry might be viewed as inherently evil or monstrous. After all, he brutally murdered an entire family. But Capote's depiction of Perry complicates this view. On the surface, Perry seems like the embodiment of criminality. He's a drifter, a man with a troubled past filled with abuse, neglect, and emotional scars. However, Capote's narrative doesn't allow us to easily categorize Perry as just a monster. Instead, Capote delves into his childhood trauma, his dreams, his insecurities, and his vulnerability. Through Perry's backstory, we learn about the profound psychological damage he endured from physical abuse at the hands of his father to being sent to various orphanages and suffering from the sense of abandonment. Capote writes, Perry Smith was a man with a haunting sensitivity, and this sensitivity often emerges in moments of introspection, where Perry reflects on his life with a kind of sadness. This complexity forces the reader to question whether Perry's criminal actions were a result of his environment and upbringing, whether his capacity for violence was in some way a product of the society that failed him. Perry Smith was a man with a haunting sensitivity, a tragic person, and yet also a cold and violent killer. He was a man who had suffered, but also a man who had caused suffering. Truman Capote in Cold Blood. This quote highlights the emotional complexity of Perry Smith. Capote's portrayal of Perry isn't just about his crimes, but about the deep personal pain and sensitivity that shaped him. This challenges the idea that criminals like Perry are simply evil. They are multifaceted individuals shaped by their experiences. In this light, Capote challenges the conventional view of criminals as evil by showing us the human side of Perry. His struggles with his past, his dreams of becoming a famous writer or artist, and his desire for affection complicate the simple narrative of good versus evil. Capote is asking us to think about what makes someone a criminal. Are they born evil, or are they shaped by their experiences? It's a powerful moment for readers as we start to question, can someone like Perry ever be fully blamed for his actions if his life had already been shaped by so much suffering? Segment 2. Dick Hickok, the banality of evil. Now let's turn to Dick Hickok, the second murderer in Cold Blood. In contrast to Perry, Dick is portrayed as far more calculating and methodical in his actions. He's a charming, charismatic individual, someone who can easily gain the trust of others, yet is capable of cold, unfeeling violence. Dick's criminality appears much more traditional in the sense that he does not seem to have the same emotional complexity or tortured past as Perry. He's a man driven by greed, a desire for wealth, and a sense of entitlement. At the time, Capote presents Dick as someone who is in many ways quite ordinary. He's not the monster we might expect, and he is described as behaving in a way that many might consider normal. He's capable of engaging in casual conversation, joking around, and forming relationships. However, it's precisely this ordinary, even charming aspect of Dick's character that challenges our traditional understanding of morality. Capote raises the question, can we label someone as a good person or a bad person based solely on their actions? Or should we also consider their intentions, personality, and circumstances? In the case of Dick Hickok, Capote is suggesting that the line between good and evil isn't always obvious. Dick's cold, calculated actions reflect a banality of evil. The idea that some criminals aren't motivated by emotional trauma or intense psychological suffering, but by more mundane human flaws like greed, entitlement, and a lack of empathy. Is this kind of evil easier to overlook or dismiss because it doesn't come with the same emotional baggage we associate with criminality? Dick Hickok was a man of no conscience, and when he spoke of the murders, it was as if he were speaking of a fishing trip or a harmless prank. Truman Capote in Cold Blood. This quote encapsulates Dick's chilling indifference towards the murders. Capote contrasts Dick's casual attitude with the brutality of his actions, raising the question of how we define criminality. Is Dick's detachment more terrifying than Perry's emotional struggle? It highlights how Dick's crimes may have seemed less evil because of his lack of emotional baggage. This portrayal of Dick Hickok forces us to reconsider what we mean when we call someone evil. Is he any less criminal than Perry because his motives seem more rational or detached? And does this make his crime any less horrific? Segment 3. The symbiotic relationship, Perry and Dick. Our final topic today explores the relationship between Perry Smith and Dick Hickok. Capote presents them not only as two distinct individuals, but as two personalities that complement and fuel one another in complex ways. This dynamic is another lens through which Capote challenges traditional notions of criminality and morality. Perry, as we've discussed, has a deep well of emotional trauma and sensitivity, while Dick seems more pragmatic, driven by a desire to make quick money. In many ways, they balance each other out. Perry's emotional vulnerability leads him to second guess or feel remorse, while Dick's calculated approach to crime pushes Perry to follow through with the murders. Capote describes their relationship as a kind of twisted partnership, where each man feeds off each other's weakness and desires. This interplay of personalities complicate the idea of moral choice. While Perry seems to be struggling with his conscience and sense of morality, Dick shows a little concern for the human lives they destroyed in their pursuit of wealth. It begs the question, if we define morality through personal choices, how does the relationship between these two men affect their individual sense of responsibility? Capote is exploring the ways in which people are shaped by their interactions with others. While one might look at Perry and Dick separately and form judgments based on their personal histories and characteristics, Capote challenges us to consider how people, criminals or otherwise, are influenced by their environment, their relationships, and their shared choices. The line between right and wrong begins to blur when two people work together to commit a crime. Each man is, in a way, complicit in the other's actions, even though their motivations may differ. It was as if the two men had been drawn together, like two magnets with opposite poles, each drawing the other closer into a deeply alignment. Perry was incapable of being as ruthless as Dick. Dick was incapable of feeling what Perry felt. Truman Capote in Cold Blood. This quote underscores the relationship between Perry and Dick, illustrating how they complement and in some ways complete each other. Capote shows us that while Perry may feel remorse and conflict, Dick's calculated ruthlessness pushes them both to commit the murders. It complements our understanding of criminal responsibility and morality. Are they both equally capable? Or is one more evil than the other. Conclusion. In conclusion, Truman Capote's In Cold Blood is far more than a simple recounting of a murder. It is an exploration of the complexities of criminality, morality, and human nature. Through Perry Smith and Dick Hickok, Capote forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the nature of evil, the way society shapes individuals, and the ways in which people can challenge or even redefine traditional ideas of right and wrong. Whether it's Perry's tortured soul or Dick's calculated demeanor, Capote shows us that lines between good and evil are far more murkier than we might have initially thought. The crime was one of those events that, once it happens, can never be undone. It stays with you, alters everything, and creates a ripple effect through the lives of everyone it touches. Truman Capote, In Cold Blood. Thanks for listening to Criminal Minds. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. I will most likely never be back with more deep dives into the minds behind history's most notorious crimes. Thank you, and good night.